Next up, we have Best Story. Previous winners in the category: 2017, Wolfenstein II, The New Colossus; 2018, Red Dead Redemption 2; 2019, Control; 2020, Paradise Killer; 2021, Psychonauts 2. Sorry, Jack. Starting us off in this category, according to The Wheel, is Mark Robinson.
I feel like that wheel is weighted because it's gone with me on I think at least
I haven't gotten it once. The wheel is
I've never
out.
gotten the wheel.
I would be happy to respectfully pass it over to Barry.
Okay.
No. We can. No, we will abide by the wheel.
I'll tell you what. Let's do a second spin of the wheel.
Do a second spin. All right. This is going to get highly contentious.
Until Barry.
I wasn't on the wheel at first, so I'm happy to be picked.
Yeah, that's what I was explaining on Twitter after our first part. Is like I had screwed up the order compared to the order I have on my sheet. So it was like I was trying to erase one Barry and put Garrett on, and in the middle of it, Mark was just like, "Take a picture." So there's two Barrys. Little Easter egg.
Yeah, can I also just say I went back and I was listening to the 2017, the first year we had this category. And I literally did not say an entire word for that entire part of the show.
This is character development.
It really is. This is my story arc. So I'm happy to be here, guys.
What else was there other than Wolfenstein in the offing that year? Zelda, I guess.
No, Zelda. No, not Zelda.
If I recall, I remember I was big on Hellblade that year, but I don't think anyone else played it.
That was the big two, and I still haven't played it.
There's some of these literally every year. There's a passion project that no one else touched, and oh my god! And I feel like still, I still tell people, you should play that Hellblade game. They're never putting out that second one. They're never putting it out. Just play the first one. That second one doesn't exist. I know it.
This also feels like one of those categories that we only came up with like 2 years ago. So when I scrolled down and saw this is the 6th year, it's kind of unreal.
Pretty great list of winners. I gotta say, I look at that list and I'm like, that is sick. That is 5 great games there. Great stories.
Pretty great list of nominations this year as well.
Yes, our nominees are Stray, Elden Ring, Immortality, Citizen Sleeper, Cult of the Lamb, Return to Monkey Island, Trek to Yomi, Norco, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and God of War Ragnarok. So Garrett, you are starting us off.
I'm going for Stray.
Yeah.
I quite like Stray. I quite like the story of Stray. I think
it's a nice little like cyberpunky thing, and you meet your robot friend, and you're like saving the cyberpunk world, and the weird things attack you. But it's fun.
But there's more to it. I think it's more to it than that. Like I really like the trapped memories that you can unlock if you kind of, dig a little bit deeper into that cycle, but not too deep. Like they're right there basically, and then you kind of figure out that your little robot pal is actually like the trapped consciousness of a scientist, and he kind of figures out that at the end he needs to sacrifice himself to aid the development of all of the robots, and just add some sunlight into the district because it's like this horrible alien disgusting place, the sunlight is too much for all the alien creatures, and I just think it's like quite a nice little quirky story, and the robot is great as well, especially as you develop more and unlock throughout the game.
Yeah, the character arc of B12, it's a nice little story that does end on that bit of sweet kind of moment, and it did enough for me to go, oh, that's I was sad enough that he decided to sacrifice himself, and for me it's like, all right, well, that actually worked then. The fact that I had that moment was like, that hit me enough. But it is just a nice little story that I do think, and there's another game or two on this list that fall into this as well, where it does do some good environmental storytelling. I do think the world has lots of little bits of detail that, I think it does an effective job of world building, but it is
especially in that central hub area as well, where there's lots of small little details in that hub you go to first.
But it's a fairly route one story that kind of like don't look up, very much on the nose. The point of what it's trying to say, which isn't always a bad thing, but this is the best story of the year.
And in a year, both in and out of games, just like really crammed to the brim with stories of the gist of, brother, we're on the capitalism train is coming off the tracks, boys. There has been no shortage of media, and I think this one is fairly low on the list. It was I would agree with the general sentiment that it was good. I don't know if it's controversial. once they introduced the talking robot, I liked his arc, but I kind of liked when the game was like non-verbal and environmental storytelling and doing kind of a little bit
my problem was
adventurous.
like the game wasn't about the cat anymore. Like, if the game is
Yeah,
about the robot more than it's about the cat, but you play as the
This-
cat.
it kind of felt like I doubt this happened because this is quite a small project, but it felt very much executive came into the room and said, "There's no talking. What the cat? So the cat doesn't talk. So there's no. So how will they understand what's going on? No, put a little cute robot in that says dialogue. Put it in it goes, or you're not shipping this.
I mean, I do think it's one of those things that with any kind of action adventure, that there's some sort of side NPC character that exists there to be the thing that you go to and say,
Of course, yeah.
what the fuck do I do next? And there are versions of that feel much more shoehorned in than this. This is like a far less egregious version of that, but I can also see to the same degree there is that chance that it was like, well, the cat doesn't talk, so like, you know,
Yeah.
I think my favorite moment of the game is at the very start when you fall into the pit and the other cats are like,
Yeah, fuck
well.
Typical shithead cat reaction, you know.
I like the bit at the start with the cats. I could have done with more of it. I just think it would have been.
That's what I mean. It became a robot game rather than a cat game.
It did, yeah. It would have been nice to get more, and it wouldn't have been hard, I don't think, for them to have spent more time with the cats. And it would have been nice. And it was the one criticism I had at the time is that, and I know this sounds ridiculous because it's a fucking cat, but I would have liked the cat to be more characterized. I would have liked the cat to feel like it had a bit more personality. Like, especially if you spent, say, even an hour with the other cats, and, you know, there was one cat that was standoffish, there was one that would always come over, like there was one that was like forever like falling off stuff, or, you know, like if they had their own little personalities, again, non-verbally, like you say, Barry, would have been cool, to the point where it would have made it feel like a more significant moment at the end when you did get out, and you wonder if that cat is, you know, and in the last moment of, like, say it goes to like the cat's eyes and it just kind of is, you know, imagining itself back with its friends, and then they sort of leave it ambiguous as to whether the cat ever does rejoin his little cat posse or not, but you see him escape at the game and walk out, and you're like, okay, great, so the cat's free and he can go and track down his pals. Like, it would have felt more special if they did that. So there are things at the story that, yeah, I think they could have done. It's just the same with the whole game, really, isn't it? It's like, it was good, but it could have just been a little bit better.
Totally.
In a lot of categories.
Now,
but
it's a game that just flatters to deceive in a way, because it has the vibes of big AAA, but it is a small indie studio.
Yeah.
So like they give the veneer of a big blockbuster experience, but obviously they can't entirely deliver on that. So it's kind of the two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Now, if that robot was Astrobot, Game of the Year.
And if that cat was Garfield,
oh my god.
And if you like had to like fight some sort of fell omen at the top of the first act, now we're talking.
And if Richard
Hairball felled.
Richard Schiff
Richard Schiff walks in.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Richard Schiff voiced Garfield, which I think I'd be on board with more.
I'd be here for it.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I agree with you, Garrett. It doesn't win, so where it kind of is there's not enough passion in me to stop anyone cutting this, I think.
Okay. Next up, Barry.
I think a pretty easy cut for me would probably be Trek to Yomi. Trek to Yomi is one of those games. I was glad I went back and finished it. I think it doesn't put its best foot forward. I think it's quite bland, but I think the story and the visuals were worth seeing through to the end. I think they do some kind of weirder stuff in the second half that's pretty cool, both visually and story-wise, but not nearly enough to kind of make it like a must-play, or not nearly enough to make it anything worth fighting for in this category. But I wish some things were swapped around about the game. Maybe it was, you know, a little bit shorter, a little bit more to the point. It's not even an especially long game, but I feel like that opening act is so kind of that people didn't get through it. But yeah, an all right second half, but it's not hanging with this very heavy competition, I would say.
It's like it's either chapter 3 or chapter 4 where your character has basically been duped and left the village behind, and while you're gone, basically this invading army comes in and just fucking wrecks shit. And this is like the other game that does the really effective storytelling in terms of just like the massacre. Like it's an absolute horror show with the things that it presents to you, and I think like all of that is incredibly effective in terms of, you know, giving you obviously the motivation for the second half of the game. And as you mentioned, there's some really interesting stuff it does in the second half. I mean, it's a fairly, like ho-hum Kurosawa revenge type of story, which I think it does effective enough. But as a whole, the game is dragged down by the gameplay being pretty fairly mundane towards, like after about an hour or two, you're like, okay, I've seen everything this game is going to offer me, and I don't need to learn any of the new skills because I've got these two skills that do everything I need.
I learned a technique late on I don't know if you got this. There's with your back to your opponent. There's like two button combo you can do that like murders people. I was like, okay, I'm starting every encounter by turning around and then just doing these two buttons. And it's just like, it was a pretty flawed game for all its positives. It was pretty flawed.
Yeah.
When you turned around, like every now and then, you were a little bit lonely, but you were always coming around, Barry.
I did always come around. That is true.
Yeah.
Jack, you're next.
Okay. Having again gone through a lot of these and heard a lot of the commentary in the previous categories, does Cult of the Lamb hang in this category with some?
Probably not.
No, don't think.
Like the thing about it is like the most interesting stories coming from Cult of the Lamb are kind of the ones you create yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which is definitely. Like the character you name does a stupid thing and the person you named it after dies, and that's very funny. Like that's the interesting story dynamic of this rather than the actual story of the game itself.
And I think put you all in the stocks at one time or another over the course of that game.
Yeah, we'd maybe push it a little higher if you had been able to create those unique stories and the game stuck the landing.
Right.
But because it didn't, it kind of like, you look at story and game as this kind of complete piece, start to finish, and it's hard to get up the energy for something that completely trails off about half to 2/3 of the way through, because you're just like, oh, this is just what it is.
Yeah. And the actual story of the game is like, they're a god, you kill God. It's pretty straightforward.
It's more the game. It's those little interactions, those little moments. Like when one of your followers comes up to you and goes, I'd really like to eat some shit. And you're like, all right, I guess we're doing this then.
Garrett's synopsis of you're a god and you kill God can literally describe multiple games on this list.
Most JRPGs, to be fair, do come down to you are a god, you kill God.
Also, someone coming up to me saying I want to eat some shit usually involves me getting Uber Eats out momentarily afterwards. So.
Okay, so that is Cult of the Lamb. Cold. Mark.
Ooh. Do I go for the spice? I think I'm going to go for the spice.
We are not this year spice averse. That is for sure.
Evidently,
I'm just going to put it out there. I don't care how much lore there is. That doesn't make a story for me. Elden Ring is not a best story contender.
No.
It just has lots of lore, but I'm not
this early. Come on.
There are several things on this list that are so much more effective.
I'm torn between broadly agreeing with Mark but not wanting to see it go this early.
On that basis, fine. But like, I'm 30 hours into this game, and partially, very much, this is on me. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing and why I'm doing it, other than just here's a list of bosses I'm going to go kill.
Yeah,
which is fine.
It's a conversation we had on the podcast like maybe a month ago or more at this stage, Mark, about how like I one of the things I appreciate about the story of Elden Ring is that the game is basically structured for the two types of player, the me and the you. Yeah. That you could literally just go gameplay and never know why the fuck everything is fucked. But no, you just have to kill everything that comes in front of you. Or you can spend a lot of time pouring around the world, and how like just coming back to previous discussions we've already had about Elden Ring, literally everything in the world is where it is for a significant purpose. Nothing is just there to fill space. Everything has a story behind it, and it probably like if this was most story, Elden Ring would definitely win as well, because like there is so much there depending on how much of it you want to engage with, and that is kind of what I like as well, is that I'm not being forced to go through masterpiece theater if I don't want to, but also like if I want to sit there and become an absolute lore pervert, I can totally do that for hours and hours and hours.
There's like 2 points that I want to raise about Elden Ring storytelling. I think one, people always kind of like use you have to read the items, the descriptions thing as a stick to beat with, which I like is to a degree fair. It's like if you want to get the real density of the world, there is density to this world. You do need to dig into all that, because this is not a game that's like, oh, a thing happened 1,000 years ago and now this is happening. It's like a thing happened 1,000 years ago and 999 years ago and 998 years ago. And it is that dense. But like, I also think it's a really interesting approach to storytelling that's not really about the individual working out what's happening. Like, there is a community sprint to understanding the story of this game. And I can totally understand if that's not for you, not like the idea of like, I just want to play this thing and understand what's happening. But I think it's totally unlike anything else in media, not just games. Well, this idea that like there is like a scavenger hunt through this game to find like all the intricate details of who these characters are, why they're here, and those details are all there. It's not like inferring things, it's not guesswork. They're all there in the text. You just have to dig through very, very deep to find some of them.
One of the cool things I love about stories in games or any other kind of media is when a story either intrigues or resonates so much that it creates this like subset of people who just want to constantly talk about it and, like you said, want to learn more and want to investigate. And like, I know I'm on the, like, I follow the Elden Ring subreddit as like people are excitedly going, I just discovered this. And, you know, we were talking about how like Blythe yesterday about how like people haven't figured out you can turn him against you and no one's figured out why and stuff like this. And a story so dense, like I said, you don't have to go to the level of reading all the items or anything like that, Garrett. You're dead right. Much like an ogre, this game has layers. You can just engage with, like, you know, your basic cutscenes when you go through the mandatory bosses. Barry's so disappointed
that
right
was
now.
Terrible. That was terrible.
Or you can you can just do the mark thing and just blast through all the combat, or you can read every single item.
Blast through might be giving me a little bit too much credit for my pacing on this.
I feel like Dave and Garrett have actually kind of swayed me more towards this game now, the more I kind of think about it.
I think it finishes high. Like, if
the ultimate reason I'd be able to let it go is that I admire it more than I care about it.
That was my initial reaction. Going back to something I kind of talked about with best looking, and I was kind of like, I would never deny that, like, God of War, just as an example from that category, looked really good. Of course it did. But I would be lying if I was saying, like, I felt something looking at it. And that's kind of where I am with Elden Ring. It's like, I really fucking respect the shit of it, and I like a lot of it. But am I moved the way I am at various moments in Immortality or Citizen Sleeper? I'm really not. Like that. And that's not the be all end all. But
Elden Ring was about Iron Fist Alexander, you would care about the story.
Right. But the thing is, there is like 100 of those in there. Like, there really is.
There's like, Sir Kenneth Haith, which he got a nomination for Character of the Year.
I met him and I killed him.
Which one is he? Is he the guy whose castle was stolen from him?
He's on the top of the bridge being like, hey, my castle's gone.
He was standing on some weird pipe thing over a like ravine, and then I walked up to him and he was blathering on, and I was like, I wonder if I can kill this guy. And then I killed him. And then I Googled it. I was like, oh, there's like a whole storyline I could have done with them.
There's like great little bits. And one thing that excites me about story in a game like that is that you can, and it's something that excited me about story in, say, like Witcher 3 as well, where there are entirely different, like, dense subquests of story you can absolutely miss, which makes it all the more special when you find one.
Right.
So like in Stormvale, there's this one guy who's looking fairly forlorn sitting on ramparts, and you find there's this whole subquest with him and his daughter, and whether he can make it back to her. The castle's been taken and he can't get out of there.
The very sad too.
The end of the story is incredibly sad. But also you could kill him as well. You know what I mean? You can completely miss him, and there's so many, like you said, Gareth, there's 100 of those. More, you know. It
really is the ultimate in kind of game specifically storytelling. More so than medium. More so than something like, just like, say, The Last of Us, right, or something like that, which I obviously love.
Which is obviously the greatest story of all time, apparently.
Well, yeah, I mean, it should have beaten Paradise Killer, but, you know, whatever. What I mean by that is that it's not you kind of play through a level and then you watch a cutscene and then you play through another level. It is literally. And it's funny because it is, you know, obviously Martin worked on it, but it is, Elden Ring feels very Tolkien-esque in the sense that everything there just is and fits together. And kind of like I was saying about the visual design of that game, like everything the game touches is kind of linked to its art design and is also linked to its world building and storytelling. Like, it's crazy. It's not, and it's as much as people talk about the item descriptions and the lore dumps and XYZ, everything is, and this is even true of Bloodborne, everything is relatively to the point. You pick up an item, you read the description, it's 2 lines. Yeah. It's not like, you know, not trying to slander a great here or anything, but it's not like Skyrim where you can sit and read actual books in that game.
Yeah.
And every time I do that, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm on page 2 of a fake book in a game. Why don't I just go play it? Whereas Elden Ring is very like poetic. Every little thing you find is so succinct and well done. I've kind of been sworn around. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Shall I take another punt? Is that
take another punt?
But be honest with yourselves. Is it going to win the category?
It could.
The thing is, I have something.
To.
I would rather win over it, but I don't know if what I would like to win over it will win. So I
think it would be my number 2 after my passion project, which isn't going to win.
It alternates between 1 and 2 with my passion project.
I think it's sticking on for the moment. That's fine. I'm not going to fight too much. I don't like the way
this is going.
No, it's not going to win. Don't worry, Jack. I won't let it win.
You don't know that it's not going to win.
Yeah.
You don't know that it's not going to win.
Like, seems like it's going to win.
All right. So
let's just stop. Let's just give it to Elden Ring now.
No.
Oh hell yeah, we'll be finished by early tonight.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take another punt then. I put it on here. I think this is a game that is better in terms of the actual storytelling and the characters in this world than so much the actual story itself, because for the most part, it's just another version of like 3 other games, and that is Return to Monkey Island, which I, again, as the story beats and the way that the story is conveyed, because basically the game starts and you're this kind of boy who looks a little bit like Guybrush, and you're thinking, hey, maybe this is like Guybrush as a child. Turns out to be Guybrush's son, who's called Boybrush, which is just excellent. And then he proceeds to tell the story of, going back to Monkey Island. And you get all of the plot beats that all feel very much in that world that kind of feel like they've probably come from previous games, but they still work even if you are not as familiar with that universe, which I'm not. This is the first Monkey Island game that I played to completion, so there were certain characters and certain kind of like dynamics between characters that I wasn't as familiar with, but the game does a very effective job of basically bringing you up to speed, but without bashing you over the head to say you don't know what's going on, so we have to tell you. Like it does balance all of those things very, very well. I think my biggest issue with the game, and this was the case for a lot of people, is that I feel like it does cop out on the ending. And I know
the ending is the best thing about the game, because so much of culture now is lore and canon and answering questions no one gives a fuck about. And
like
the ending of
no.
Well, like
there's one thing that game does not do, it's answer questions. How do you know what?
Exactly.
It's because Dave was looking down at his phone. I was like, I could definitely get his attention.
It exclusively raises questions. It does not answer them.
As soon as he started saying that, I knew what was going to happen. I'm ready for you prick.
but the entire point of the ending of this game is that it really doesn't fucking matter what the secret of Monkey Island was. And so you go through the entire thing, you do the big climactic sequence, you're chasing LeChuck through to find what the true secret of Monkey Island after 30 years.
It's a proper thing, you're in the temple. It's like a whole fucking like Temple of Doom sort of thing. There's lava everywhere. Big kind of epic climactic finale, and then you go through the back door of a building in like the first Melee
Island.
Melee Island. And basically it's like, how is it? It's like a kind of fairground or an amusement ground.
It's like an amusement park of Melee Island, and you can find a little treasure chest that the key is there open, and you can get a little shitty little t-shirt that says I discovered the secret to Monkey Island. And that's the end of the game. And then they take you back to sitting there with the child, with Boybrush, and you can tell him like one of multiple things. You can literally say the secret of Monkey Island was the friends made along the way, which
that's what I was about to make that exact joke.
I absolutely love that, because it's a real big pet peeve of mine that we've turned canon over to corporations, because there's a lot of people who talk about it was like when Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was made non-canon by Disney. I was like, it's not. Like, it was canon. Yeah, canon is like a discussion among communities via assessment of the actual culture. It cannot just be declared by the corporation whether or not it's non-canon. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is canon because things tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I love an ending that's just like, fuck off with your canon, fuck off with your bullshit questions nobody wants answers to. It's the friends made along the way. It really is. The journey is what matters, not the destination.
Disney did that to Star Wars as well. Remember when they bought Star Wars?
All the comics and stuff.
The comics, the books, and most of the TV shows you've spent 30 years loving because there was no Star Wars movies to tide you over.
But you say Barry, it's for the best, but then they've spent the last 3 or 4 years
churning out garbage.
Pulling from those comics and from those books and from that lore to form,
I guess,
a lot of the TV shows that they are doing now, which, by the way, are all very good.
I'm not saying, Gareth.
Oh, let's not get into that. Let's not get into that.
I'm here all night. I'm more angry about that. Elden Ring win this category 1,000 times over than have you slander.
It must be said, I'm perfectly fine with Return to Monkey Island going here. I'm fine, but that ending rocks. That ending really
I'm not
rocks.
saying that I needed to know what the actual secret of Monkey Island, because again,
sounds like you are.
I didn't.
Yeah, you really need to know. But like the whole point of the game is like Guybrush goes on this fucking rampage where he's destroying cultural objects, trying to chase these answers, and everyone's like, "Dude, you're destroying everything you touch to chase this meaningless solution," and that's the story. I love it. I think it's really good. I fight with going to here because like it's not my one. It wouldn't be my two.
I haven't finished this game yet, but I do think it's funny that you say that's what the ending is, because the other thing I would want to say is, well, what could the secret actually be that would make people happy is the other thing. You know what I mean?
It's basically like
Spider-Man jumps out of a treasure chest.
Well, I was going to say, like, Jack will know the reference, maybe some of the others will, but like the Just video by Radiohead, like it's 3 minutes of him talking, saying he's lying on the pavement, going, "Oh, I can't tell you why I'm lying on the pavement," and at the end of the video, he kind of mouths out the words, and then everyone else is lying on the pavement, and you don't actually know what the words are.
The briefcase in Pulp Fiction,
or try to find out who Robert is.
Yeah.
There will never be a satisfactory answer to that mystery.
It's Tony Soprano, dead or alive? We don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so Return to Monkey Island is gone. It's me next. And just based on the fact, and I am so sorry, that I don't think, based on the lack of people who have played it, that it is going to win. Garrett, I must. Your latest game of the year of the week, Xenoblade Chronicles.
All right, let's settle in for 20 minutes while I explain the story to Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
Yeah, big fucking swords, big fucking hair. We got it.
Before you start, I read the story and I kind of watched some YouTube videos about the narrative, and it made me want to play the game 10 times more. Listen, it's not just here for me being like, oh, weird anime is good. The story of this game is legitimately sensational. I cried at this game. Like, the story of this game is fantastic. So you live in this world that's like a composite of the worlds from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which seems weird on the surface. It turns out you might be living in a computer simulation the entire time, and the actual villain of the game is the existential dread of people not wanting to move forward into the future, so it creates an endless now. Let's put that to the side. The main thing in this game...
let's just put that to the side very easily there.
Let's put the human manifestation of dread to the side and talk about the other stuff in this game. So, like, the main crux of this game is the characters you play as have 10-year lifespans that are revived every time they die so that they can fight in war, meaningless war, endlessly to fuel a war machine. Over and over and over again, they do that for eternity. They're revived when they die, and the only way they can get out is that they survive the 10 years. So the way they play with that as your characters, first of all, are thoroughly indoctrinated in that system at first. They don't question it. They're just like, yeah, we fight. Why else? What else would we exist for? We exist to fight. So as they break out of that system and they examine, like, one, what it's like to be stuck in that endless war cycle, and two, what it's like to exist for 10 years where there's like, these people have never seen babies before because they're all grown out of pods. So there's like a really like heartwarming moment in this game where all the characters who have only lived in the 10-year life cycle, because naturally there's a society away from everybody else that has already broken out of this cycle because I suppose they had babies and then those babies live normal lives. Weird how that works. Don't question the logic of Xenoblade. But there's so many moments in this game of those characters confronting like basic human emotions and ideas like babies and love and nature and all of that and the beauty of the world that is really like sensationally heartwarming. And I think they examine it from so many different angles. And like everyone will tell you that has played this game, they will talk your ear off about the end of chapter 5. So one of the characters, Mio, is right toward the end of her life cycle, and you're like going to war with, they're called Mobius, which is a word that's dangerously close to Morbius, which I think is a good reason it should win. But you go to war with Mobius, which is like the evil villains of the game trying to sustain the endless now. And there's a moment in the middle of the game where they capture you naturally, and you think you're going to get the big heroic escape, and they're like, no, she's going to die in a month. She'll fade away into existence once her 10-year cycle finishes. So we are going to hold her in prison for a month and then do what is like tantamount to a public execution of like have the entire world watch her fade away. So you sit in that prison and you watch the characters go through it for a month as they like try to come up with any way to escape and somebody should save them or any of that stuff. No, you just sit there and watch the despair set in and watch like the acceptance set in. And then they bring you to the scene where you stand there and you watch her fade away and die. There's no, well, there is a heroic moment. They do some stupid anime nonsense with body swaps and multiple characters, which is a whole other side of the story, which is actually quite affecting in its own way. But like you just sit there and you watch that moment. Those characters have to stand there and watch their friend die after being held in prison for a month, waiting, knowing that's exactly what they're there for. And it's like, it's an hour-long cutscene in the middle of the game, 40 hours in, like where the game just stops and they do this like mini feature film.
Lost Mark.
Like it's really, really, really sensationally well done, and I think it's a really brilliantly realized world, an excellently told story with memorable characters. I'd even talk like, so you meet the characters End and M, which look strikingly like your two leads. It turns out those are the two characters who like gave in to the Mobius in a different past life, because because they show you at one stage all the different, your Noah and me are your lead characters, and they show you through the years the different versions of them have like fought the evil Mobius. And then it turns out two versions of them just gave in. They're like, we will accept immortal life in exchange for not fighting you anymore, and we will fight on your side to stop future incarnations of ourselves. And like the fact that you see like the version of yourself that just stopped fighting, I think is a really cool, different approach to those kind of characters. And you see different angles of those characters. I think it's a really, really good game. And I think the stories of the first two are nonsense. It's not like this series is known for like really good stories, because you can, when you ask me this, well, why is this world a composite of the world from the first two? It's because in one of the games, a guy called Klaus started something called the Conduit and accidentally split himself in two and sent himself to an alternate universe. And now the worlds are colliding because of that, which is only like background dress. We've all been there. We've all accidentally split ourselves in half and sent ourselves to a parallel dimension. But like that's the reason these two worlds are colliding, which is only really like background fact. It's because there's another couple characters from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 that show up in this as well. It's all like window dressing, really. You don't actually need to have played those games. But yeah, I think it's not going to win. No one's played it. Nobody has the time to play this dumb 60-hour JRPG.
I now want to.
It's really good. Like everyone that plays this game will tell you it's really good and make it like borderline their personality. I'm one of those people now. There's a category I will die on the hill for it. A lot more coming up, but I will let it go from best story, even though I think it's fantastic. You should play it. It's a sensational game.
Like even the little chapters of it, like there's a chapter where they go around liberating towns, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the whole point. So once you break out of your colony, like you then you go and liberate everybody else. It's like, we're going to free you all from the shackles of Mobius. I nearly said Morbius. Mobius.
Careful now.
And
I love the combined worlds. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the sort of time compression gimmick from Final Fantasy VIII, of like
a lot of the ending is very much like that. It's like
you've lost me now. I could have.
You were on board before this, because like it is the whole idea that like this world, they don't make it explicit that it's a simulation, but the idea is like the people from the game, the first two games, all mounted like a digital like origin point that's meant to reboot the universe, perhaps in a simulation, maybe literally. It might be literally. They don't make it clear. I think it makes more sense if it is like you're living in a simulation that is simulating like the dread of people after their worlds potentially ended, and now they're on this weird digital arc, and now and that weird digital arc has decided that all of their anxiety and fear is too strong, and they don't actually want to move into the future. We have to create a different world for them that is like this weird endless now that uses fear and anxiety to fuel itself long into the future. It's a very weird game, but I think it's a very good one.
See, this is why I don't watch anime, right? Like I stopped after Cowboy Bebop, kept it simple. Cool guy in a suit, smokes, kills bad guys. That's it. That's all I need.
Like
you
this
mean they don't
it's a very existential game.
Garrett, by any chance, is there voice acting in that game? Because I'll tell you what.
Oh, there's
Mark
fucking loads. It's really good, by the way, because
Yeah,
like
see,
some of it's
ruins
not
it.
good in these games,
Hey.
but it is sensational in this
Mark
game.
said he doesn't
There are
watch
a lot of
anime. Mark, you've watched 700 Pokemon games. That's anime. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Xenoblade Chronicles
Honestly.
3. Play it. It's like really, it is honest to goodness. It's a very good game.
I really want to.
We're sticking with you, Garrett.
Oh dear goodness. Is Norco one for anybody?
I mean, me and Mark are the big Norco heads, I would say.
But I feel like you're Citizen Sleeper guys over Norco, right?
I can't speak for Mark, but I would say I Citizen Sleeper 100 times over Norco. The thing about Norco is I think this is another kind of recurring thing we do every year, where it's kind of like, if there was a style award that encompassed looks, story elements, music, and a general vibe, I feel like both Norco and Signalis would probably hang a little better. I think Norco was a cool storytelling experience, a very cool world building. Like I said earlier,
It's
about
such
Stray,
a fascinating world. I think it's a more interesting world than Citizen Sleeper. I just think Citizen Sleeper tells a better story.
Yeah, totally. I think amidst all the kind of cyberpunk kind of corporate dystopia media that came out this year, what I like about Norcos is that it's going for an extremely near future vibe, where there's like androids that serve as like servants in households, but for the most part, it's still a very recognizable world that say we might live to actually see.
I mean,
it's not Neo Tokyo.
Yeah, I mean, it's based off of Norco in Louisiana, which is a real place,
right?
Which does have a Shell petroleum center, which has led to a high cancer rate in people, which is what like elements of the story of this game is based off of. So that's all built in of a reality, but there are also android servants as well. And
drones that are like slightly more advanced than they are right now. Do you know what I mean? It's going for that very kind of like, hey, this game could be set in like 2050. Do you know what I mean? Like, believably. Yeah, but I actually found, especially the final act, I didn't think Norco especially really hit, unfortunately. But that's a proper journey, not the conclusion kind of game.
I feel like that ending, I feel it's doing more of like it's going for an evocative feeling.
Yes, totally.
And like a comprehensive feeling, you
Right.
know, which sounds pretty fucking pretentious, or maybe it is, I don't know. But
that's that game. It's evocative more than anything else. And like I said, I think it's a phenomenally composed vibes, not in the chill way, just the general sense of it has a very finely crafted vibe that's kind of gross and gnarly and ponderous.
It's a proper like collapsed world.
Yeah,
you know, it's like everyone is just trying to like, again, like Citizen Sleeper, but that leans more into the optimism, where I guess Norco kind of goes the other way.
Yes, yeah.
But it has some such like just interesting characters and some really unique plot devices and story beats that it goes with, that it fucking goes. Again, like the whole thing with this kind of Nazi incel cult of everyone called Garrett, and what it does with that is just like, what the fuck is this thing?
I can't escape being called a Nazi on any podcast.
I know.
Incidentally, if you want to go to Garrett Loves
Don't you dare.
harrisbros.com.
Oh, don't you dare, David.
And so I think it comes down to it's that much more of a compelling world than particularly a compelling story, which in some ways I think, again, they're not trying to tell a kind of fully, because it's not a linear story as well, because like you go between your character and the whole kind of plot device of the game is like your character has been kind of traveling around America, has come back to Norco because your mother passed away a few months ago, and your brother's disappeared as well, and the game does like jump back between you and your mother as well, and then you kind of have like parallel stories going along,
right?
And then at a point they sort of merge at the end, and again, like the story at the end is a bit messy, but it's doing it more, I feel, from an evocative angle than a comprehensive angle. And it's a game that has stuck with me. It's a game that has lasted the year in terms of when I think of games I played this year that left an impression on me. It absolutely did do that. From its themes, its tones, the way it looks, the way it sounds. Like, it's one of those games that you just get absorbed into, and like, yeah, I think it's an incredible piece of a gaming experience, but it's not. There's at least one game on here that I do think story-wise I think tells a better story, even if it maybe isn't as interesting a world or as original a world maybe. So yeah, I'd say Norco can go here if Barry agrees as well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you for sure.
All right.
I think a slept on game that's on Game Pass, and it came to console a few weeks ago, so it's on the Xboxes.
Speaking of Barry, you're up, pal.
Okay.
It's tough.
I'm torn between there's ones I don't want to cut.
Well, what have we got left?
So the remaining ones are Elden Ring, Immortality, Citizen Sleeper, and God of War Ragnarok. And I'm kind of torn between the ones I want to protect, and after best looking, I do not want to put the boots to Ragnarok again. I want to give Jack a break.
To be fair, it deserves to be on here though. Like it's a really good story.
I didn't finish it, but it seemed like another really enjoyable story of that ilk, and great performances up and down as well. But I haven't finished it, so maybe if there's a sales pitch to be had on why it should stay, I hear it. You know?
Again, and I'm sure it's the point Mark will make, because it's his like one of his biggest bugbears about it is like part of the storytelling is the pacing of said story, and that's the one thing that is absolutely all over the place in that game. Like if all the shit in the middle was cut out, it's up there with my 1 and 2.
So you're saying if you like watch the God of War Ragnarok YouTube cut, it's probably like sensational.
Yeah.
It is.
But the thing is,
right, as a movie,
the thing is, and I'm not saying that we have to just like cut Ragnarok now, but like the biggest issue I have with this game is a lot of this game is centered around Atreus, and I don't find Atreus to be a particularly compelling character. And it's so much like one of the reasons among a number of reasons that I'm not exactly excited about a God of War 3, which is coming, is that the game is obviously going to be centered around Atreus, and both from like his story arc, which doesn't really, I'm not that interested in, and also, and this isn't as relevant to here, but mechanically he's really fucking boring to play as. Like every time I'm playing as Atreus, it's like I just want to be fucking Kratos, and
that's got nothing to do with the story.
It doesn't.
No, he did say that though.
Yeah, I did just literally say that.
I know, but like I feel like bringing that up in a best story category kind of feels like sandbagging a little bit.
To some degree, sure, but I still feel that like he's actually, I just don't find him particularly likable. I'm sure he's a teenager. Who fucking likes teenagers?
I actually think what they did with Atreus in this game made me like him a whole load more, to be honest. I found his storyline really compelling, and the fact is, like, his kind of final moment with Odin, like, it just had such a massive resonance on me. Like, I just thought, like, you know, he spent the whole game kind of figuring all this shit out, and then he even gives his humanity is kind of what separates him, I think, from Kratos, is that he is a little bit more of a regular person. He's not some like hulking evil god. He's a teenager. He has hormones and emotions, guys. Like he has to understand how people work. And he even gives Odin a chance at the end of the game to stop being such a massive blundering shitheel. And he even shows a little bit of mercy with Odin as well. Obviously, he traps him inside a magical marble. It is what it is. It is what it is, right? But
and we thought Xenoblade was crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no bifurcated universes in God of War, unfortunately.
Yes.
Unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, I think, you know, and then obviously, well, we'll get smashed, and then that's obviously going to be, like Mark says, probably the central theme of the next God of War. But I really liked his character arc and his character development, and he went from being like a sidekick and a gimmick to somebody that I actually really enjoyed. You know, whether you'd like enjoyed like the moment to moment play of him, but I really enjoyed all his scenes, and I really enjoyed his development in the game. So yeah, that again, that's just me. That's just my opinion, and I feel like I've kind of obviously the high man on God of War, and that's really lonely place to be.
There were. I mean, of the few hours I did play, one thing I did really appreciate about the writing in the game is that if there's one thing I hate in games, it's a bad journal. But if there's one thing I love, it's when a journal is really good. And I thought the Kratos journal stuff was like really good. And I thought they have an impossible task of walking the line. First game as well, but this one even more so, of kind of trying to humanize that character, but not betray the character, and still have him be Kratos, but be softening in that direction. And I think they did an excellent job on that, from what I explained. On the flip side of that, I found a little bit. So obviously, you know, in this game compared to the first one, Kratos can't be quite as gruff as he is because they went through that whole arc in the first game, so you should be behaving slightly different in the second game, which they did. I think is it just me, or is Ragnarok a little more quippy than you would like? I feel like there's a lot more jokes, and I kind of found it grating. I had like 2 complaints about characters not shutting the fuck up. One was about puzzles and one was about joking. I'm like, I need a break from all this yammering. I felt like I was playing Guardians of the Galaxy at some point.
I wouldn't say I felt that.
Not as extreme, but there were definitely some moments where I was just like, this doesn't feel like, what I come to this game for.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed it. But again,
the one thing
it's so funny. I feel bad because it's like any point that you've kind of people are making about God of War, I feel the opposite way, and then I don't want to just sit here and just say the exact opposite to you. But
you're supposed to shout "You're wrong" at the top of your lungs, Jack,
but
and then throw
I don't want to.
The one thing,
smash the block button.
I think the strongest point of Ragnarok, and sadly, it's not a story arc that kind of goes over the whole game. It's more like the first third, maybe a little bit more than that. Is everything in the follow-up from 2018 with Freya, and obviously the fact that her son is killed, and everything that ends with 2018 and it follows into here, and obviously she's looking for revenge, and the game starts basically with her chasing after Atreus and Kratos, and you have like a whole story arc that takes up about the first third of the game, and there's this kind of balancing act. Like there's a whole chapter where Kratos and Freya are having to work together, and she obviously is still like ready to kill him at a moment's notice, but she knows that she needs him to do the things she needs to do. And I think that they do a really good job of like those two dynamic, the dynamic of those two characters at that moment in time, and where she does get to a point of like peace and acceptance with what has happened.
Yeah,
I think all of that is super
me
effective. That for me is the best part of the game.
Is that it's acceptance. It's not like, oh, I forgive you for killing my son. She implicitly says, I don't fucking forgive you for killing my son.
Yeah,
but I also now I don't want to kill you because I've A, made peace with the situation and accepted it, and B, we've gone on this like a little bit of an adventure together now, and I kind of understand. And I just think it felt like growth, and it didn't feel like, okay, now they're just best mates or whatever. It just felt like a genuine a connection, and I just feel like it's a game about fantasy and like these kind of like gods and everything, but at the same time there's a real vein of humanity in this game. Like it actually feels like a story I can buy into. I understand the actions and the motivations of all the characters in it. It's really well written and really well plotted, and it puts everything on Front Street. Like, yes, if you want, you can be like me and go on loads of quests and like freeze water to throw axes and find symbols in those 3 symbol chests. You can do that. But also, if you just want to play through this because you just want to do all of the story beats, yeah, you can do that. And there's nothing that they're hiding away from you. All of the devil is in the detail, and it's a really compelling story. And you might get sick of it if you're a bit like Mark and you feel like there are parts of it that drag, but it's worth the journey because I think the story is great. And even to Barry's point, if you just want to fucking watch all of the clips on YouTube so you can see what the story of God of War is and understand it, it might make you want to play the game because it's a really valuable story, I think. But
you say that, but this is, I guess, is like my one other big issue with this game, and it's not just a Ragnarok thing. Like I'm not ragging on Ragnarok with this, but it is the latest example of it. Is that with other points where we've kind of spoken about how this game does not shut the fuck up, that also extends to basically anytime you are walking, anytime you are just in that world, people are talking. And like, so what happens is, you'll have a section where you'll have like the cutscene, the introduction to the chapter, and then you're walking along and the 2 people are doing a bunch of exposition, and then a wave of enemy appears, and then you go back to a bunch of exposition, and then another wave of enemy appears, and there's a bunch of exposition. And the actual things that they're talking about in those moments, sometimes there are parts that actually are like, elevation of characters and stories, but a lot of the time also it is purely just fill up for the sake of like, these people have to be talking at this moment. We cannot have some fucking quiet.
It's Uncharted syndrome, because that's the way those games went, where it's like constantly Nathan Drake and Sully are just quipping back and forth. And again, like that, when it's important stuff and when it hits, it's good. But then, like, 60-70% of the time, you're just like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, this moment or this setting I'm in would be a lot more impactful if you just took a breath and let me take it in. With like some of the best shit in that first game is when there's no dialogue. There's just like the reveal of this incredible thing and some swelling soundtrack in the background that lets the visuals speak for itself, which is an element of storytelling. Whereas this, it's one of those, it constantly feels the need to show and tell at the same time, even when there is nothing to show or tell about.
It's the equivalent of like modern music production where everything is turned to 10. There is no dynamics. There's no space for quiet and loud. It's just loud. And again,
I think it goes back to the same thing as like the problem I had with the, press circle to scroll through a space. The idea is that like they give you this section that you walk through, or they give you whatever the bit of dialogue or whatever the story beat is they want to tell you. The idea is you're meant to be more immersed by the fact that you stay in the world at all times instead of just doing that in a cutscene. But when you start to see through that and you realize you're just having me walk down this corridor so you can tell me this thing before we get to this arena.
This patch of the game exists because this is the only way we could figure to convey this nugget to you.
Yeah, at that stage, just show me a fucking cutscene. Don't drop
kind of
the pretense. Drop the pretense that this is a thing I'm interacting with or engaged. Just let me put the controller down. Don't make me do a quick time event halfway through. Just show me the cutscene.
It's got a lot of the video game equivalent of could this call have been an email?
Right.
I think it's 1 hour Xenoblade cutscene. Let me sit there and cry with my feature movie.
I think it's buckling under the weight of not only just being a AAA game, but also kind of under discussed thing is, this was a PS4 game. So you ain't getting it. You ain't getting those beautiful PS5 seamless loads, which are not a flashy back of the box game seller, but they're pretty fucking good in a native next gen game. And so
for as few of them as exist,
that exist, when you get them, they're really cool. I think this game is just on a macro level, but also then specifically on the story. I think it's just held back a lot by old design ideas and old tech. And I think it definitely has strengths, which is why Jack was so passionate about it, and it made the Final Four. But I think it's
and it is that like the being held back by old design ideas. Like it's you have those scenes where they're just bantering back and forth with 20% of it out of use because we're a Sony first party studio. That's what we do in between set pieces, is we talk incessantly, and sometimes that talk is interesting. And like, I suppose your mileage may vary, again, to defend what like Jack is saying, as well as like Jack is in on the characters, in on the story. So you're probably like that, like I am with some games, where actually the more of that, the better for you. You want to see those little moments where, because the four of us aren't in on it to that extent, to us it's wasteful. It could be more concise, things like that. So I totally see both sides of that coin
in this game. Like like we have a Ragnarok level event in this game.
We do, and that whole section is really, really good. But that's more like, that's not so much a best story part as that's more just like good game direction and art direction, and how that is all laid out. And I said this, when I was talking about
scripts those moments, like
you do. And again, but I said this at the time with Ragnarok. Like, look, Ragnarok is Sony first party. On a technical level and on a directive on a level are as like good in the industry, as proficient in the industry as you can get for that. But they're almost like, for better or for worse really, they're chained to certain conventions where they can't escape basically all the complaints that we have, because everything you say there, and I would agree that the whole like last chapter of the game is tremendous, but unfortunately there's a good 20 hours before that made it. By the time I got to that, I just wanted this fucking game to end.
It's like we said, like when we talk about best story, we talk of it as a cohesive whole piece. We don't just go, well, this element of this story was good, the rest of it wasn't up to par, but because of this one part, it's the best story of the year. Like, it's not the best chapter, not the best level, it's best story as a whole piece. And of what remains of the three of the four I have played, and of the three that remain, it is the least enjoyable, cohesive piece of storytelling. Even though those I will absolutely go along with. The moments where it picks up, the moments where it picks up and big shit happens, it's great. But then I'm like forced back into corridors of banter for another few hours until they knock another crumb off the table for me. Whereas, the other two things I've played on this are just like you can constantly immerse yourself in more and more without any of the like, this is clearly filling time in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue against anyone's preferences. I can't. I think having watched a lot of people play some of the other games on this list, there's one game that's left on this list in particular out of these three where, to me, it should be an absolute knockout, no questions asked winner of this category. And it's not the one I think that is going to win it either. But God of War is my number 2 behind it. So I am ultimately going to let it go. But it sucks because I almost feel like, and I don't know if anyone else feels like me, if anyone else feels like me, they think the story of God of War is really good, consistent all the way through, had a great time playing it. Hit me up on Twitter, maybe we can DM.
You can start your own podcast.
Exactly.
Welcome to Jack.
If I were to guess, we haven't gotten to the poll yet, but I'd be nearly certain God of War won the poll.
I'm going to start my own podcast with blackjack and hookers.
Hookers,
that is what's going to happen.
The way
maybe
things
on
are
that
going,
one, hell yeah.
the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if Elden Ring won the poll.
I feel Elden Ring probably, but I'm with Gareth. I think God of War probably at least second. I would say.
Yeah. It's done better than it has in the room here with us. On the
going to be a
poll.
swerve
That-
when
that I'm
Sherry
sure.
wins the poll.
Jack,
Jack, you need to get another person in here next year. Keep adding it until more people are on Jack's side.
What happens every year is that I feel like what I think is good, and I guess it's good because it's having different voices and different opinions on the podcast, but I do end up on an island quite a bit. And it's tough because you can't, there's not a lot I can do really with this.
Look, we've all been there for sure.
You know what?
Like
of all
Jack,
the categories,
Hades was the best story of 2020. All right,
I just
oh my
Xenoblade
god!
Chronicles
If we're
3
going
out
to
to die.
relitigate 2020, Paradise Killer wasn't the top 5 story that year. Last of Us Part 2 pisses and shits over Paradise Killer and Hades.
Oh, she gets her
my
finger
God.
bitten off at the end. Whatever. Who gives a fuck?
Oh my god! Listen, and I can
can
sympathize with that
we move on?
because I don't
Can
say
we
I was
do-
on an
can we
island,
do
but Dave
something
was
else?
with me. Didn't get me anything. My god.
Yeah.
That is the one. Anyway.
But I just want everyone to
God of
know
War
that does like God of War Ragnarok. It's like there's not much I can do here. You guys that like it, you know how
Jack
good
has done his best. He has
you
fought the
you
fight.
know how good the story of this game is. You know that it feels lovely and consistent and big. And if any of when I looked at the categories and I was like, I can't really argue for the total package because I think a lot of the arguments that that you guys have made about the rest of the elements of the game, I don't feel like I can really defend it in any other area, even though I think again it would have been probably in my top 2 or 3 for best looking as well. This was the one category where I was like, okay, I think this is an inarguably fucking fantastic story, and I have been hit by a train. So it is what it is. I accept
the key is, Jack, to love a story that no one else played. So when you can talk about it for 15 minutes, then at least you can kill it with dignity, as opposed to everyone else telling you shit.
Again, it just makes me want to play Xenoblade, and then we can re-record this podcast, and I'm on Team Garrett for that one.
Damn right. Okay, so now we've got Jack to cut the last one.
Here's where I would cut Elden Ring, but obviously it's gonna win, so there's no point even saying it.
I don't think Elden Ring is gonna win.
It's a real toss-up between me and Elden Ring and Immortality for me.
Yeah,
as well. I don't really have a strong preference there. They're both really good at doing very, very, very different things.
Yeah,
these
are 3 completely unique games.
And I think the artistic vote is Immortality for me at this point. Whereas something we've already hit on is Elden Ring tells a story that no other medium could tell. I think Immortality might be able to get most of the way there in like a limited run HBO series type deal.
And in some ways might be better off, some might suggest, but
it's
still a video game.
I kind of like, but what you get out of Immortality kind of comes from you combing over the footage.
It's true.
Because I remember when I was listening to podcasts about that game, I guess I must have just Mandela affected it. I thought you were playing like a named character who was a detective looking through that, but you're not. It's literally just you. You are just looking through that footage.
Yeah. I think that's. I don't think that's your fault. I think like because the marketing leading up to it, like the posters, I remember were like, "Can you solve what happens?"
Yeah,
and it's the poster for it was very Fire Walk with Me.
Right.
So you're thinking of Laura Palmer and solving that mystery and shit.
I would. I know this is an uphill battle for me and Mark. So we will join Jack on his new podcast shortly, where we'll big up Citizen Sleeper. I will say that this is spicy. I would say right there with Signalis and Norco, I would put Immortality more on immaculate vibes than enjoyable story. If I'm being perfectly honest, I wasn't especially moved by the main character's plight. I thought it was interesting and extremely well executed. I didn't take much from it as an actual character piece, and I would actually have Immortality 3 here, Citizen Sleeper 1 and Elden Ring 2 for me.
As I kind of talked about in best characters, so I talked about the kind of like the through line through it all, the kind of like the meta story over all the footage that's going on. So I won't like dip into that again, but I will say, as much as I'm a higher man on that particular story than you are, not to say that you don't like it, but like I said, it's your third of three. I also would watch the fuck out of all three of those movies.
Right.
Like I enjoyed the story of those movies, the story of the production of those movies, and the story of what's really going on in Immortality. I absolutely love it to bits. And it is like it's trying to pick between your children, between Immortality and Elden Ring for me.
But to what makes that story more compelling for me though is that I actively wanted to figure it out, and I think games where I wasn't figuring out how the mechanic and how to do this, that, and the other thing, I wouldn't have had the enthusiasm to kind of play through that. But I did with Immortality, because everything that I saw was just so strangely compelling, and all of the moments in it was so varied, and there was such wild tonal shifts as you clicked through different images on the thing, trying to piece together bits of story and understand what it was that you were looking at, and you just seeing so many different angles and narratives and bits and pieces that gradually come together to form this whole understanding of this world.
And it's the one, I suppose, if you're going to try and make that comparison between Immortality and Elden Ring, it's the one to which the story is most crucial to the entire experience.
Yeah,
because like we said, because Elden Ring is so layered and
you can just go boosh on monsters and have a very good time.
You could just do the Mark Robinson routine, like it just not bother your hole with any of the story. Whereas like the whole thing of Immortality sits on the story.
Editing video if there's no good story in Immortality. You're fast forward and rewinding.
I think as well, I'm way too anxious to have enjoyed any story beats in Elden Ring. I was just trying not to die. Basically,
Immortality is a game that introduces a large amount of anxiety in its own way.
I was weirdly off-put by that.
Yeah,
it felt like anxiety that kind of you would have a nice, healthy tension in a thriller level of anxiety, because I know I can switch it off.
She can't actually kill you. You'll see her, and she's like, "I'm safe. I'm okay."
This is the second time I've drawn comparison to stuff of his, but it does give me that kind of Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet, David Lynch.
It's so
everything is off. There is mounting tension. I literally have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why I would go, my pick would be Citizen Sleeper here, is I was kind of looking at these three games that are left, and like, well, this is another fucking apples and oranges, completely bizarre category where I think Citizen Sleeper, in my head, I was thinking, oh, well, that's like the more conventional A to B story than the other two, especially Elden Ring, which is kind of just so doing its own thing. But then I kind of realized it's actually not, and it is in a weird way. It's kind of conventional because it's got a lot more traditional characters and a lot more A to B progression. But it's to harken back to something I was talking about previously in the moment category, is that it's a story-based role-playing game with decisions that are motivated entirely by you and your relationship to those characters, which I think makes it kind of it's simultaneously a conventional video game story, and it is also kind of like we were saying about Elden Ring. It is like kind of like the ultimate video game story in the sense that it is all decision and player input driven, and it's not driven by get the bigger gun or get the gold plated armor. It's driven by your relationships to the various characters. And we talked about,
and unlike a lot of branching conversation style dialogue that you get in a lot of modern games, the choices that you make actually fucking matter.
Really do.
You could just kill everybody. Just kill them.
Yeah.
You can just stab them.
There is actual the directions you go off are based on the things that you choose, where sometimes you're having a conversation with someone and like the choices are yes or of course, and it's like, no, give me something actual.
It's like dialogue line A or dialogue line A1. It's not even B. It's so there is the mildest sub tier.
There is some actual like substance to it, and as I said, it's one of the two things that like brought an actual genuine tier to me this year. Yeah,
you could argue Elden Ring did that too for a very different reason.
Yeah,
it brought tears to all of us.
And I think like we kind of gave the hard sell on Lemon Mean, and I think those are kind of like the stars of the story. But there's also just like I remember when so the ending, because the ending I got kind of isn't really an ending because it allowed me to kind of proceed kind of pottering around my various communities and advancing the storylines I had left. And I really like the bar subplot where, again, kind of like in keeping with a lot of the other threads in Citizen Sleeper, you start kind of slumming it being a little, kind of like a dishwash, and you get to know this character, and then you get a shift behind the bar, and then all of a sudden you're kind of you get a community in the bar, and all of a sudden you're invested in renovating it and building it and becoming a cook. And it's kind of like that's like a much less ponderous storyline, about what it means to be a person and colonization, all that stuff. It's a lot more kind of small, but at the same time it's infinitely more satisfying than so much other stuff in games. And I think, it's like basically almost every single character you meet in that game, you get something really meaningful out of it. And I don't know if, Mark, you're the same on this, but so many of the decisions I made really hit me and affected me. It's one of those decision-based games. It's fairly short, but I had no desire to re-go through it, because my kind of thing is my playthrough is as far as I'm concerned what happened in that story. Do you know what I mean? And I am not interested in the traditional gamey thing of, okay, I'm going to go and say the opposite thing in every conversation and see what happens, because I have such an attachment to those characters that, like, that's my ending for Lemon Mina, and that's my ending for this character, and the community of botanists at the very top of the island and stuff like that. I was so engrossed in that story that I almost don't want to go back to it. And because to me that would always be like, that would be me releasing my episode 1. Do you know what I mean? I would be butchering my own story I loved by going back and redoing it with a bunch of decisions I actually don't agree with in my core, because I picked them for a very specific reason the first time I went.
I actually did a Trade Federation plotline.
Just getting into taxes.
Just the hideous 2000 CGI thrown on top.
I did come back to the game 6 months later to do. I played a couple more hours of like a new run, just to kind of go off in some different directions. And I didn't finish it for a second run, so I couldn't say like what another ending would do. But I also at the time, I had that such a complete, and from what I read, it was like the best ending to get, and that was completely like just of my own natural choices. So I was like,
a heavy shot at Barry's end. It's like Barry's like, this is my ending. It's really emotional. It's like Mark is like, I got the best ending.
Oh no, mine was emotional as well.
But this is kind of what's great about it, because this is like I was saying. I was thinking, Citizen Sleeper is relatively conventional compared to these other two, but then I was like, but it's not actually like that, because it's me and Mark are so both profoundly touched by completely different endings, and it's like that thing that that kind of conversation point that comes up so much about From, which is that you or a lot of open-ended kind of RPG games, which is you talk to a person and they say, oh, what, you saw that? Oh, no way, I saw this, and I went up here, and I went upside down, and I fought a dragon, and I thought, and it's like everyone has an entirely unique experience with the same exact game, and that's strange, awesome,
like that too.
Exactly. Yeah, it's Life is Strange. It's the better moments of The Walking Dead, even, I just remember like, the hot topic of 10 years ago was whether or not you stole that sweater to give to Clementine, and people arguing about whether or not that was moral. And, that's, I think that's great in a story game when people get so invested in those.
You spoke about the bar moment there, but like one of the bits that I remember the most about the game is the character, the cook or the chef. I can't remember his name exactly, but like, you know, the first time you meet him, he'll cook you a meal for free, and it's one of the first times you get like a bit of real proper warmth and compassion of someone who's like, hey, who are you? Tell me your story. And like, you know, he gives you the free meal because you've paid him with this story to tell you a little bit about him. And you know, he's like, hey, anytime you want to come here, bring me some mushrooms, bring me some food that you get from the other side of the ship, and I'll cook a meal for you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And you actually learn more about yourself by the stories that you tell him. And it's like an interesting approach to it is exposition, but it is done in a way where there's like a kind of natural dialogue and natural conversation happening between two people. And I really like appreciate the way that it does those little kind of bits of conversation and the little kind of threads of character building it does through ways that it isn't just I'm me and this is me and I'm telling you my story. It's like, no, there's an actual kind of purpose to the way it does tell that. And
that guy doesn't eventually turn out to be a villain, or he's actually your brother, or he gives you a piece of armor. It's what you got out of that quest was that you did the quest and you told the stories and you got the dialogue, and the writing in that game is so great that it is like being told a little story that you just enjoy. You know, it's I think the best argument for the story of this game is that the story is the reward in this game. Getting more of the story is the MacGuffin you're chasing in this game. Is you're chasing more story.
Why didn't I play Citizen Sleeper?
Jack, I think you would have loved it. I think you would have loved it. I think you would have absolutely
I gave it a whole 15 minutes and then ran away scared.
I will say the one thing for it, and that's not really a storyline aspect, it is a mechanical aspect. It is a little bit intimidating for the first hour or so.
It's a lot of meters ticking down and clocks ticking down. And
all those systems, they put all that tutorial stuff on screen. I was like, oh.
And I was like, because I was, you know, I don't consider, you know, I was like, I am going to fucking get permadeath. I'm going to get fucking owned and I'm not going to see any of this stuff, and I'm intrigued by what this is doing, but I'm going to show up to Game of the Year not having finished it and not having gotten to anything good because I died and got hungry and shit myself to death and saw nothing.
Never even played the game.
We all do.
and then I didn't even play the game on top of all
that. For the sake of wrapping this category up, what are we going to do? This was Jack's call.
Jack, you wanted to cut Elden Ring, was it?
I'm okay with that.
I'm happy to move to Immortality of my two.
I think in my gut, Elden Ring's not my one even left here. So,
yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's not my one either. So I guess it's no one's one. So I suppose that's the fairest thing to do.
Good run, good little run,
good little game. Check it out, folks. Sound this summer.
May not have heard of it. So that leaves us with Immortality versus Citizen Sleeper, and time for a vote.
Okay.
Garrett.
Immortality.
Barry.
Citizen Sleeper.
Wouldn't wild if you just said Immortality.
Jack.
Yeah, it's Immortality, but I'm really sorry I didn't play Citizen Sleeper.
Mark.
Citizen Sleeper.
And I'm going to go with Immortality.
Just like character, Immortality squeaks past Citizen Sleeper.
Yeah. So our winner for Best Story 2022 is Immortality.
And I loved Immortality, but now that's two awards where I'm looking at it win. I'm going, Immortality.
The horrors of having passion projects.
Oh, I hate liking things.
So, are we ready for the poll
I say
results?
that Jack liked the most popular game of this list, and he also got dumped out of here. So
I know. I actually feel like the guy that's trying to go like, no, Coldplay are really good. You
know what? Yeah, we can suck it up and take our Citizen Sleeper loss with the Ragnarok slander that's happened.
Yeah,
we've all come out with bruises on this one.
Are we ready for the poll results?
Yes.
No.
I can give you. There were five. There were 5 games with what I would call a statistically meaningful number of votes. So I can give you the top 5 in reverse order.
Hell yeah,
go for it.
Okay, so in 5th place with 7.3% of the vote, Citizen Sleeper.
I'm actually surprised at that. I'm pleasantly surprised.
I'll take that. I'm very happy with that.
Pleasantly surprised at that.
In 4th place with 9.8% of the vote, you Citizen Sleeper fans are going to be fuming that this was ahead of it. Stray.
Oh, fuck off!
Oh my God. Everyone was so nice to Stray earlier. Now here you are.
Democracy once again.
In third place with 14.6% of the vote, Elden Ring.
That's
Yeah, I
wow.
didn't think it was going to win. I really didn't.
No, neither did I. Because most
It's
people come
'cause
to
of-
those games, they're like, "What the fuck is happening?" I'm so confused and
You know,
scared.
the 5-10% of people that really get into the lore are probably the people that voted for that, and then everyone else does not care about anything that happens in that game.
Interestingly, this has done a lot better than I necessarily would have expected, with 22% of the vote, Immortality.
Wow.
I thought that was going to get buried in every category because of the number of people playing it, but there we are.
Or
I guess it makes perfect sense that the two categories that did well in are the very heavy narrative categories.
Yeah, and I think we all knew where this was going from moment one, but number one with 26.8%.
Xenoblade Chronicles.
God of War Ragnarok.
Jack is the man of the people. Jack is the man of the people.
You ruled out Xenoblade as statistically insignificant.
Yeah, it got. Hold on, Xenoblade got 2 votes,
one of which was me.
And I'm pretty confident I know who the other person is. Hi, Chaz.